Okay, so we have 2 more learning goals and a couple more word clouds experience exercise. And then at the end, you have time to ask questions again. So if you have questions, you can jot them down, and then we can take them at the end. All right, so let's move on to our 4th learning goal. So describe strategies to recruit, train, and deploy and support non-professional caregivers. Now, you may ask, who are non-professional caregivers? And what is the role of non-professional caregivers? So here we have a definition. So non-professional, informal, unpaid mental health caregivers are usually family members, friends, neighbors, church friends, or significant others who provide emotional support, compassion, comfort, social support, financial support, spiritual support, monitor symptoms and medications and treatment. Now, in Canada, according to the Mental Health Commission of Canada, 75% of all patient care is not provided by doctors, it's not provided by nurses, not even PSW, it's provided by people like you. And this saves the economy $25 billion each year, enormous sum. So your role is very important. Now, let's take a look at this job ad. Job ad says, help wanted for mental health caregiver. Job description, care for the physical, emotional, financial, spiritual needs of a person with mental health challenge. Consistently monitor their mental state, identify early signs of illness, relapse, and deterioration. Help assess services, supervise treatment, and provide emotional support. What are the job requirements? Or maybe, Anthea, you can talk about that.
No vacation.
It gets worse.
No break, no pay, overtime, on call 24/7. Might be subjected to potential physical, verbal, psychological, financial threats and abuse. Feeling powerless, helpless, frustrated, angry, scared, sad. Willing to work harder for less reward and more negative outcome. Able to accept frequent negative performance reviews with little appreciation, but a lot of terms. Difficult to resign or quit. Contract may be unwritten and unspoken.
Now, let's be honest. How many want this job? Good, good. None of you are crazy. None of you are crazy. But a lot of you already have this job. Why? Not because you're crazy. I hope this is the reason. Because you hear and you're responding to a call from God. This is a call from God that requires a response from each of us. So you see, you recognize, you experience firsthand the mental health challenges and the suffering. And God's calling you to stand in the gap of mental health challenges and suffering. That's the only reason you have this job. And let me tell you, it's a good reason. Because people who experience mental health issues, challenges, they don't see God. They can't experience God. They may even resent God or be angry against God. You have something devastating, a good way of coping is to find someone to blame. Blame yourself, blame other people, blame God. They do not see Christ. Only people they see are you and I. So it's so important for us to really embody Christ in a living, transformative way to these people. That's why you have this. It's a calling. It's a calling to represent Christ before people who cannot see Christ due to their circumstance and their experience. Now, there are 4 kinds of caring ministry, and we'll talk about each and some examples. So this is based on how formal it is and how much organization there is. There's an informal, spontaneous kind, so each of us do that every day, caring for family members, friends, and neighbors. There's an informal, organized kind. So there's a team of caregivers with assigned schedule and duties. There's a formal, spontaneous kind. So caregivers are assigned according to need. And then there's a formal and organized kind, a care ministry organized by a church. Now, let's talk about if we are to organize a caring ministry, who do we select to train to be the caregivers? Now, in their book on lay counseling, 10 and Scales listed 10 selection criteria. So Anthea and I will go through each of them. As we go through each of them, I want you to do a little bit of self-reflection. Use a simple scale of 0 to 10. So 10 means you're pretty good, 0 means I need a lot of work on this. And just to see where you're at in terms of each of these qualities. So I'll do the odd ones and maybe Anthea can do the even ones. So the first quality you can assess yourself is spiritual maturity. And here it's described as a spirit-filled, committed, knowing scripture, regular prayer life, ethical integrity, moral character, responds well to authority. Okay, so give yourself a rating, number 2.
Letting them think.
Okay.
Okay. Second one, psychological stability. Open, vulnerable, no serious psychological disorder or relationship conflict, free of addiction.
Okay, number 3, love for people. Warm, caring, genuine, real interest in people, heart of compassion, grace.
Spiritual gifts. Appropriate spiritual gifts include exhortation, wisdom, knowledge, discernment, mercy, teaching, pastoring, and healing.
Number 5, some life experience. So not be too young, but have some life experience, especially within relational context.
Previous experience, perhaps formal or informal training or experience in helping.
Number 7 is the background. So it's helpful to have diversity with different ages, sex, education, socioeconomic status, ethnic, cultural background.
And are you available and teachable, responsive, open to learning? Have time for caregiving?
And number 9, maintaining confidentiality. So you understand, respect, and maintain appropriate confidentiality and protect the privacy of those being cared for.
Number 10, background check, willingness to submit any necessary checks for risk management as a standard protocol.
Right, so using this brief self-evaluation, you kind of know where you're at. Now, let's think about effective caregiver qualities from your experience. So where to guide you through another guided imagery exercise, and we're to use another word cloud for you to share. So this is about effective caregiver qualities from your experience. So you go to mentor.com, enter the number 6133-5354, scan the QR code, or if you're on your computer, just click on the link. So again, ground yourself with a few slow breaths. So just pay attention to your breath as you breathe in, and pay attention to your breath as you breathe out. Now, recall an experience of being cared for and comforted during a time of distress in your life. And again, if you feel more comfortable having eyes closed, go ahead. Visualize the person who cared for you. Look at their eyes. Look at their face. Recall what they said and what they did. Now, describe a few key qualities of the person who care that help you to feel cared for using the word cloud. Give everyone a minute to do that. Select a couple words to describe this person who care that help you feel cared for, and enter it through the word. Okay, so let's switch to the word cloud. Okay, so maybe Anthea can help us describe key qualities of caregivers that help people here feel cared for.
Genuine, patient, kind, listening, empathy, loving, available, compassionate. I like that little one, hug.
Mm-hmm.
Powerful one. They're all good words. Passionate's a big one now.
Right. Yeah, so thank you for sharing. So these are the qualities in caregivers that help people to feel cared for. So again, looking at this list, think about where you are strong in, which qualities you already have, and then which qualities you really need to work on to be the kind of caregivers that helps people to feel cared for. Now, we'll have a couple of slides that talks about screening process for formal organized caregiving. So we're just going to skip over it. If this is something that interests you, and look at the slides yourself. And Tan and Scalise also recommend a screening questionnaire with 9 questions. So again, you can look at that yourself. So I want to jump to what are our strategies in terms of recruiting, training, deploying, and supporting non-professional caregivers. So today is just the beginning, this 3-hour workshop. right? Standing the gap of mental health challenges and suffering. So it provides you with the theory, the conceptual framework, but not necessarily many practical skills. And then we'll go on to start some basic training in March in the incarnation model of caring, and with opportunity for you to practice some of the skills. So that will be 15 to 18 hours. And then we recommend self-study, group study of the effective tools for caring for individuals, couples, and families. So these courses are 40 hours each. And if you do a series of 3 courses, that's 120 hours. So you can do it in groups, so you can do with the people that you're helping. And then the 4th step is to join and participate in online caregiver support group at Grace Health Center, which meets usually twice a month, 50 minutes per session. So there are 3 purposes in these support groups. So the first is to provide evidence-based accurate knowledge. Because if you Google about any issue in mental health, you're going to get a lot of hits that are trying to sell you stuff that usually do not work, right? So you need to find reliable information, right? And if you use apps like TikTok, studies have shown only about 20% of the information is actually accurate, right? So most of the information you see are actually not accurate, not based on science, not based on medicine, not based on our evidence. So evidence-based knowledge is very important. Second, practical support. So you're with your tribe, you're with your village, you're not alone. And then lastly, practical coping skills and strategies. So that's the purpose of our support group. How do we do that? Each 15-minute session, we follow the same format. So first, we have people check in, so share the experience in the past couple of weeks, any successes, any challenges. And then as a group, we pick some challenges to address. People can share their lived experience, what works, what doesn't work. And then we have a checkout time. People share the experience in the group, and also some take-home lesson that you can use. So that's the format every week. So I encourage you to participate in these groups, to engage in these groups. So caregivers, especially mental health caregivers, are high risk of burnout. You may have a good heart, you may have compassion, you may have good intentions, but it's easy to get burnout. So it's so important to get that support. This is not something you can do on your own. It takes a village to address mental health challenges and suffering. These groups are part of your village. People here in this community are also part of your village. Okay? And then in March, when you start the training, so living with mental health challenges and suffering. So the English one will be on Sundays, 11:15 to 12:30. The Mandarin one will be on Saturdays. So they like to have 4 3-hour modules. 2 are virtual, 2 are on Zoom. And here are the goals for the course. So we help you to understand the incarnation model of caring, learning the skills to be present amidst mental health challenges and suffering, and learn to utilize left brain strategies. You learn to use right brain strategies, so both truth and grace, and then participate in ongoing support groups. And we also have a tentative outline for the 12 sessions. I won't go through that in detail. You can take a look at it. Now, in terms of the support groups, so currently we have 3 ongoing support groups. So the first support group supports people with lived experience, caregivers dealing with neurodiversity. So autism, ADHD, learning disability, these are the normal, typical neurodiversity issues. So that's on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays every month. English groups at 12, Chinese group is at 12:50. And our second support group is the mental health support group. So this is on the first and third Wednesdays, also at 12 for English and 12:50 for Chinese. And then lastly, the parent support group on the second and fourth Wednesdays. So you're welcome to join these groups. Now, there are different ways to sign up for these groups. So the easiest is our clinic has a table outside. You can go there and our staff will help you to sign up for these groups. And in the past, our courses were in person, so we had a lot of workbooks, hard copies left. Now they're virtual, so we don't need the hard copy workbooks. I bought a whole bunch of English workbooks, and you're welcome to take them home. Okay? And then, of course, we can also start future support groups as the need arises for people taking care of seniors, for couples, or other support groups as needed. Now, groups are very efficient use of resource, right? So in a group, there might be 10 people, they're all struggling, they can share, support each other, learn tools. So there are things in a group that you cannot get through individual counseling. So the first impression when people attend a group is, hey, normal. You look around, everyone's like you. They're also dealing with mental health challenges, the stigma, right? And the suffering. And that's a good feeling to have, right? You're not stigmatized. You're not shamed. You're normal. So that's something that a group can give you, whereas it's harder to get that feeling in individual work. All right, let's finish off with understand and apply an incarnational model of caring. So this is based on a very important verse in the Bible, John 1:14. So, Anthea, you can lead everyone. We'll read it together, okay?
The Word
became
flesh
flesh
and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth.
Right. So, very short verse, but theologically, it's a critical verse in the Bible. Now, the following PowerPoint slides talks about this in great detail. I'll just jump to the diagram in the last slide. We'll just go through this. So I think I already mentioned this as one of the questions that was asked. So there are 400 different psychological manuals for therapy. Who has time to learn 400 manuals? There's no one. Are they helpful? Are they valid? Well, to some degree. But I think as Christians, we have a better manual to help others. That's the Bible. And we have a model, an example we can follow, Christ. And this makes learning to care for others a lot more simple, right? You don't have to read all the psychology stuff. It's just to read your Bible and reflect on what it says. So, incarnation model of caring. So, Christ is our model. Christ, our example. So when Christ sees our suffering, sees our challenges, how did he respond? The Bible says the Word became flesh. In other words, he left his own world, humbled himself. He became man, one of us. He entered our world. And that's the first step in caring, isn't it? If you're in your own world, the person you care for is in their world, there's no connection. They cannot experience you as being present. And a lot of times, we try to do caring from that perspective, right? What you're doing, it's wrong. I can't believe what you're doing. Do this, do this, do this, then you'll be okay. You're speaking from your world. You're the know-it-all. They know nothing. And it feels very condescending to be in that kind of relationship. Wonder if they don't want to talk to you anymore, right? And you say, great, I helped another one, problem solved. They don't talk to me again. Really? No. You became another unsafe person in their life that they need to avoid and to stay away. So this is hard. It's hard for caregivers. It's hard for pastors. It's hard for parents to leave your world and to enter into their world. So letting go of how you feel, your own needs, your own fears, your perspectives, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Putting all that aside. And then you can enter someone's world with an open heart, an open mind to experience what they are. So we had a question. These people refuse treatment. Which perspective is that from? Yours or theirs? I think it's pretty clear. It's from your perspective. So the first step is to put away your perspective. Well, they are refusing treatment. They must have good reasons. Let's be curious. Let's be open and try to explore what those reasons are. Help me here. So you know there are treatments for this and that, but it's so hard to engage. I'm sure you must have very legitimate reasons. Could you help me understand what those reasons are? I know it's hard. You may not have the economic resources. There's a lot of shame, loss of faith. There are cultural reasons. You're Chinese. This is not acceptable. Does any of that fit? You tell me more? Having an open mind, being curious, entering into them. Now, when you do that, they feel your presence with them. They're no longer alone. Present emotionally, psychologically. And even though you do nothing else, that's already a sacred gift to them. Your people are suffering. You've already made a big difference. When we're struggling in the valley of shadow of death, what does God promise? No solution. He promises presence. It's His presence that brings us comfort. It's His presence that gives us strength to endure. That's the solution, presence. And it's the same with people with mental health challenges. Our presence makes a whole difference. Brings them comfort, brings them hope, brings them strength. And someone who's struggling with, I'm unlovable, I don't deserve love, you're present with them in a loving way, in a patient way. No matter how hard they push you away, you're still there. You're still kind. You don't need to say anything. You're already given them a corrective emotional experience. Maybe I am worthy of love. Maybe I am worthy of care. And make a huge, huge difference. So once you develop that rapport, that bridge, by entering into their world, then you can use tools to help them. So when Christ came, He dwelt among us, full of grace, full of truth. So grace talks about emotion, acceptance, understanding. Truth talks about how we think, our beliefs. So we offer them understanding, acceptance, compassion from a position of grace. And then once you have this bridge, you can convey truth. How God sees you, how I see you, how you can see yourself. And then these are the means to bring about change. So Christ being present, dwelling among us, conveying grace and truth. And when we receive that, we have justification, sanctification, and glorification. And it's the same when we can be Christ to other people. Through our presence, we can convey grace and truth from God. And when they can receive and take in that care, we help them to overcome the barriers to justification, sanctification, and to glorification. So that's the incarnation model of caring. Sounds simple, but it takes skills and a lot of training. And we'll start doing that in March. All right. So before we close, I'd like to share with you my prayer amidst mental health challenges and suffering. And I believe this prayer is based on scripture and solid theology of suffering. So this is my prayer. Now, if this also represents your desire, you can repeat it. I say this prayer. My dear Heavenly Father, take this cup of suffering from me. Yet, not my will, but yours be done. Grant me sufficient grace to endure and make your power perfect in my weakness. Use this cup of suffering to make me Christ-like and bring many to Him. So that you may be glorified. Amen. Does God honor and answer these kinds of prayers? You heard me speak for almost 3 hours. I'll let you be the judge. Okay? So the last workout, we're going to review our learning goals and to see where everyone's at now. And then we'll have time to answer questions and to hear your comments, your experience from today's learning. Okay, so use this workout to indicate the extent to which you have attained each of our learning goals using a scale of 1, not attained at all, to 5, mostly attained. So again, if you're on your phone, you go to menti.com, enter the code 381-98864, or scan the QR code, or if you're on your computer, you can just click on the link. Okay, so here you give a numerical rating. 1, not attained at all. 5, mostly attained. So the first goal, to recognize common mental health challenges and suffering. The second one, identify gaps in mental health care due to diversity, inequality, and low resource. Okay, so let's switch to the workout. I think maybe the code that we use is not correct, and we follow the code on the slide. List 4 strategies for faith communities to stand in the gap. Number 4, describe strategies to recruit, train, deploy, and support non-professional caregivers, and understand and apply an incarnation model of caring. Okay, so let's switch to the word how, and then we'll see if there's a different code for that. Okay, it's still the same code. All right, so everyone enter your answer, and then maybe Anthea can summarize it.
First one, 3.94, recognize common mental health challenge and suffering. 4.4, identify gaps in mental health care.
Next one would be around 4, I guess, looking at the
4.
orange. Yeah.
List 4 effective strategies, standing the gap. 0.8, describe strategies to recruit, train, deploy. And 4.1, understand the incarnational model of caring.
Right. Okay, so thank you. So most of you are getting it, right? This is not an easy topic to talk about, and it's not an easy topic to engage with. Okay, so the next 2 slides, we provide resources for non-professional mental health caregivers in English. And then 3 more slides with resources in Chinese. So you can take a look at those and use those links. And then we'll have some time for questions. Now, again, you can raise your hand if there are any questions, and we can give you a microphone to ask your questions. And we also ask everyone to take a few minutes to just reflect on your learning experience today. And this is our last word cloud, and you can share your experience today. So today's learning experience, what did you like? What did you learn? What will you now do? What do you wish? Okay. And then menti.com 16633-705, or you scan the QR code. Okay, so you can do that while we take questions. Okay, any questions for today about mental health, about challenges, about suffering, about treatment, about approaches? Feel free to ask. You can break the silence around mental health. Here? Maybe. Mm-hmm. Right, right, right. Okay, excellent question. So we use a very integrated approach. So we don't see people separately, their spiritual part, their emotional part, their rational part, their social part, their moral part, all in one. And these parts obviously affect each other. So that's a frame that we work with. So there are emotional issues, there are spiritual components within the emotional issue. So people are depressed, they might feel abandoned by God, right? So that's a spiritual issue. So it's all in one package. So we need to address it together. So that's why in our clinic we use an approach called spiritually integrated psychotherapy. And a few years ago, we actually published our results on this. So before, people might, say, "Oh, Christians, you pray in the session, you talk the Bible." Where's evidence for that? So through painstaking research, we have evidence for that now. So spiritually integrated psychotherapy. Now, maybe Anthea, you can answer that. But Anthea has different hats on, right? So one of the hat, she's a registered psychotherapist. She's also a hospital chaplain, pastor, right? So maybe you can take this question.
Yeah, you asked a really good question. I give you an example. Like if someone is dealing with their family member having stage 4 cancer, and you receive that diagnosis, and your pastor comes and says to you, you need to pray more. Don't worry, God's going to heal you. God's going to heal your other half. Pray, do more, and when you do more, then he will be healed. Just hope and pray. It's going to get better. Now, that is one form of caring. And it may be different. There may be a different way, and I'll pose a different way. For example, if that pastor then came to you knowing that, your partner is dealing with stage 4 cancer, you can say, hey, still do the treatment, but trust that God will be there no matter what. Even if there is death, God is here. So sometimes when we talk about spiritual care and pastoral care, we might just fixate on one option. If you do more of this, God then will listen. That's very, very dangerous, because if that person then does die, how do they live with God? How would they live with themselves? I did not pray enough. I must not be faithful enough. That's something that we need to learn not to do, versus, hey, let me be with you. Stage 4 is a reality. He may not make it. What does God say in this time of walking in the valley? How can we be there for you and accept that possibility while being hopeful to do all the things that we need to go to get medical care, to still pray and lament and to hope? So I think you're touching on a really important question, and it really takes sensitivity to know not to park God as, well, if you do this, then God will listen, and only talk about the positive. We need to be more broad to think about all aspects and how God is in all spaces and circumstances. I wonder if that's helpful for you.
And going back to our model, incarnation model of caring. So our first task is being present with someone with a terminal illness, someone who's facing death, all the fears, all the uncertainties, all the doubts, and being present with that. So you have to let go of your own world. Right? All your pat verses that you use not be helpful. And just be present in that world of someone who's experiencing death. What is that like? Ask, and they'll tell you. What's it like to be facing death? What is it like to have unfinished business with loved ones? What is it like? Do you have any regrets? And those are hard conversations. Right? It's easier to just say, pray more, do this, do that. But what they need the most is your presence. Facing death can be a very lonely experience. Death is a lonely experience. It isolates you from people you love.
Yeah, just to follow up, like you asked the question, is it okay to just pull up the Bible verse to say, do not be anxious? And is that enough? I think it's a very integral part of it to go back to the word. But it's like if you have a cold, do you just pray for the cold to go away and not be anxious? Or do you go and take some medicine or seek help? So I think it's definitely an integrative approach that would be helpful than just to bring in the Bible and say, just do this. Right? God gave us the wisdom and the capacity to seek help too. So when you need help and you're not sure if the Bible is enough, I think talking to your pastor is really important, and to people around, and to think broader.
Yeah. So, yeah, so excellent question. So this has to do with when you have reached your limits. When do you need to refer to professionals, right? And there are, I think, a couple of criteria that we need to look at. So one obviously is to look at the symptoms. And there are scales for every condition. So the ones that we use most often is one called PHQ-9, Patient Health Questionnaire 9. And this one's wonderful. It's validated, comes in almost every language in the world.
It's also free.
And it's also free. So you can do the scale, and we'll give you some sense of the severity. Okay? So 9 questions from 0 to 3, maximum score is 27. 0 to 5 is relatively normal, 5 to 10 is mild, 10 to 15 is moderate, 15 to 20 is moderately severe, over 20 is severe.
Depression.
So that's for depression. So once you have this scale, then you have a good idea whether it's normal, mild, which maybe people can handle on their own, or moderate, severe, then they might need professional help. Now, within that questionnaire, question 9 is a screening for suicide. So you also look at acute risks. Suicide is one of them, self-harm, hurting other people. And then that would be a flag to get professional help. For anxiety, the one we use is called a GAD-7, Generalized Anxiety Disorder Scale. And again, 0 to 3. So reflect back on the past 14 days, how many days of each of these symptoms? 0, 1 for a few days, 2 for half the days, 3 for over half the days. And then you get the score. And then you can see how severe it is. So that's one indication. Look at symptom severity, symptom duration, and the level of acute risk. Now, the other thing you can look at is not just symptoms, is the level of impairment, how much this affects a person's function in terms of the job, in terms of school, in terms of home life, in terms of relationship. So some people can have minimal symptoms, but have great impairment. So you may consider referring them for professional help. Some people may have severe symptoms, but they're coping. They may have minimal impairment. Okay? And they may just need some support. So these are the things we would consider. And obviously the level of suffering and whether people are willing to seek help. Right? So if they're willing, then if they're not willing, then there's a difference. Yeah, so those are some of the indicators. When do you need to refer? Do you have anything to add?
No, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay, here. Right, excellent question. So in order to be an effective caregiver, in order to help people grow, in order to help people face issues, guess what? You need to. You need to face your issues. You need to come to terms with you. Right? So, excellent question. So, the best preparation for a caregiver is not necessarily school, but the school of life. School of life, where you grow, where you face your own issues. Right? So that's why in our pastoral counseling course in the professional trainings, one of the first exercises we do is to do this on yourself. See what comes up. See if you can use these tools to deal with yourself first. So, excellent question. So, one of the best preparations to be a caregiver is to face yourself, to take care of yourself. And the course we mentioned, self-esteem, manage emotion, especially the last one, journey to wholeness, coming home to the self, helps you to look at yourself, look at the mirror. Okay? Thank you. Great question. Okay, Helen. Yeah, I think you were first. Yeah. Yep. Later on, we'll give a link to sign up. Yeah. So from what I understand, maybe Henry can clarify this. It's in person for people here, right? And the people downtown, they can do it online via Zoom. That understanding? Yeah. Yep. 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 Yeah. So it's hybrid. If you're not here, then it's Zoom. Yeah, so obviously on Zoom it will be recorded, right? So if there are significant people who have other commitments, other ministries, that's perfectly understandable. So I would encourage you in that situation to form your own study group, to watch a recording together and do the exercise together. And then it will be asynchronous. Okay, good practical question. Right, excellent question. So when we enter someone's world, how do we be present without taking on, absorbing all their pain, all their suffering? So professional counselors do what we call debriefing. So when I do trainings after session, we debrief. People talk about their feelings. What was that like for them? Get it out. Don't take it home. So that's a rule when I train students at clinic. Before you leave, let's debrief. Get everything out. Don't take any of this home. So that's a boundary that we set. And probably for non-professional caregivers, it's wise to set the boundaries. When you're present, you're there. When you're not there, you're not taking it home. If there's stuff that bothers you, you pray over it, you give it to Christ. Right? You journal about it. You pray about it. So you put it down. Don't carry it with you. Right? So especially when you're working with people who are severely traumatized. So there's a condition called vicarious trauma. You pick up the trauma. And then you have the nightmares. You have the fears. You have the flashbacks. And then your world is no longer safe. So I would get support for that. So it's also like PTSD, but it's vicarious through the caregiver. So that's why if you're helping someone with a lot of trauma, so take care of yourself, have clear boundaries, find people to debrief with, join our support groups, so you don't take it home with you. And if you do take it home, you give it back to God. So make that a ritual, make that a routine, so that you do that every time. So in our business, especially now with young therapists, the burnout rate is super, super high. Super, super high. Because we're so compassionate, we're so helpful, we absorb it. And then it affects. It affects our world, affects our relationship. If that happens, I would seek help, seek support. And for therapists, I encourage them to have ongoing supervision, a safe place where they can debrief, especially very traumatic type of situations. That stuff tends to stick. Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Excellent question. Okay, here. Okay, excellent question. So there are different levels of organized caregiving, right? So one extreme is everything's organized. You recruit people, you screen them, you select them, you train them, you supervise them, you deploy them, match them with the need of the congregation. So usually churches with a lot of resources, like some of my students at Richmond Hill CCC were doing that. So they had marriage ambassadors to care for couples. They had lay counselors that they kept training. So they are super organized, and they all have the resource. And there's the other extreme where there's not much formal organization. It's just handpicked people who are trained, who are just responding to needs. And probably the best resource is the book that we mentioned on lay counseling by Tan and Scalise. So they go through all the different scenarios and provide a lot of tools in terms of organization. How do you get into that? And then making sure you have professional support. You want to build an organized caregiving industry. So in my church, I usually have lunch with a group every Sunday. And that's a way of supporting them. Right? I have lunch with the group leaders on Sunday a month. I have a lunch with the people helping in the courses once a month. And they can share their experience, share challenges, and we work through them. We teach skills, we do role plays over a nice lunch. So that's the kind of support that we give on an ongoing basis. And now we do that online, our support. Okay, excellent. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because there is some specialization. It's different when you care for someone with an eating disorder than caring for a couple whose relationship is in. Yeah. Okay, excellent question. Any other questions? Okay, at the back. Yep. Right. Okay, excellent question. So self-harm, eating disorder, depression, anxiety, OCD, PTSD, these are all forms of emotional dysregulation. So we don't pathologize it. Self-harm is their way of trying to calm themselves, trying to regulate their emotions. And the physiology shows that, right? When people cut themselves, the brain actually releases dopamine and endorphins. People feel good. Now, we see it a lot in people who have trauma. So trauma causes them to numb out, to dissociate, which is an awful state to be. When you cut yourself and you feel the pain or you burn yourself, it's a way to ground yourself, feeling real again, feeling connected with the real again. So we have to understand the purpose of self-harm and the function that it serves. And then we'll be able to enter into their world. I know this sucks, but you have no other way to ground yourself when you dissociate, when you're numb out, spaced out, when the emotions are all over the place. It's the only way you know to ground yourself, to get back into reality. So understand, accept, validate what they're doing. And then once you have that relationship, then you can help them to learn alternatives to emotional regulation than cutting, than burning, than the self-harm. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah. So self-harm and suicide are very different clinically, right? So the people who self-harm have issues with emotional regulation. People who want to die, they are intent to die. So there are two different categories, and the treatment is different. But in terms of our model, it's the same. So you leave your world, enter into their world. The kid who's self-harming, show them you understand, you're there for them, you're present, and then they no longer feel alone. And then when they no longer feel alone, that already helped to regulate their emotions, right? So God has given us two ways to regulate emotions. The one way is we do on our own. We call self-regulation. So if a baby's crying, is hungry, you leave the baby to cry, eventually it will stop. Right? It will take half an hour, eventually it will stop. It will regulate. But mommy or daddy can come pick them up and hug them, and then they'll stop crying too. Now, in terms of God's design, God's creation, in terms of attachment, which one is more efficient? Self-regulation or using attachment to regulate? I think those of you who had babies, the answer is pretty obvious. The system that God designed for us to regulate is attachment. Having someone present with us who cares, who understands, it soothes the anxious brain. It brings hope to the depressed brain. So when we're in the caregiver role, we're priming the attachment system. When we're present, we're priming the attachment system. So you don't necessarily have to teach self-regulation. Your presence already helped them to regulate. So think of the crying baby, right? Attachment is the most efficient emotional regulation system. Okay, great question. Thank you for asking that. Okay, so let's finish off. So maybe, Anthea, you can go through some of the people share their experience in terms of their learning. So let's go to the last word cloud, and then we'll finish off.
Thank you for everyone's responses. I'll just read a couple. I've got the help I've been seeking and looking for. I wish to learn more about practical skills, the material being available to reference. Intrigued by foundation course because it is rooted in our identity in Christ. When we use such a workshop be offered next? When would such a workshop be offered? Incarnation model, thank you for explaining this, gives me concrete framework to help others in need. Be compassionate and caring to those who are suffering and mental health issues. Good review, looking forward to March. Good introduction, makes me want to learn more. I like the use of learning models.
Okay.
Can we go to the next
you can
slide?
Scroll to the next slide. I think press page down. Or the down arrow. I forgot which arrow. Either page down or the down arrow. There, thank you.
Learn about 10 qualities for caregiving, and I'm doing those. Great. I will now seek to extend grace as a bridge before truth. Wow. Great start to destigmatize mental health caring. I will take part in future training. I wish more people will participate. How to rethink and reword thoughts that lead to dead ends. I wish there were more practical strategies. We'll take that in feedback. Good recommendation for online training. Helping someone in need is a big challenge for professionals and non-professional caregivers. It's still quite difficult. Yeah, I agree. In a general overview of the topic, awareness for people around us, even without skills, and that our prayers with them is a great support. Yeah. I like how mental health was compared to physical health and the urgency needed for care. I learned try and not put up barriers and understand others. I will now listen. That's really wonderful.
So thank you, everyone. So as I said at the beginning, today is like coming home to Chinese gospel, my spiritual home. And we're Chinese. We don't go home empty-handed, right? We don't. So hopefully this is my gift to each of you, having that awareness, a tool, and resources to address an issue That's very, very important. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Tat Ying and Anthea, for being with us this morning. This is just a start for them. Actually, they're going to be here next week and the week after. They're both very talented. It'll be in Mandarin next week and Cantonese the week after. And from the questions and the responses, I see that this has really sparked your appetite to learn more, how we all can be better caregivers. And most of you here now are some sort of ministry leader, and I think that's why you've been invited here to this session. And starting in March, as we've seen, we're going to have